My colleague from New Hampshire, and I want to tell her that third time's a charm, right? So we've had this bill on the floor twice now, and we really think this is the opportunity for us to do something good for our constituents and for our country. And this is an opportunity for us to pass energy efficiency legislation that helps create more jobs, that makes the environment cleaner, makes our businesses more competitive, makes us less dependent on foreign sources of oil, helps with the trade deficit because of that. So this is a win-win for everybody. And I want to thank Senator Shaheen for her work on this. We've been working on it now for, 4 years together. And the last vote we had out of the Energy Committee on our legislation was a 20-2 vote. So we have worked on this over time. We've gotten more and more support as people have understood what we're doing and why it's so important for their states and, again, for our country. The economic growth in this last quarter was 0.7%, meaning less than 1% growth. That's kind of discouraging, you know, and you have to look around and say, well, what could we do to help get this economy moving again? And one area is energy. There's no question about it. And we believe our legislation will help. It's going to create jobs. We have a number out there. Senator Shaheen talked about just under 200,000 jobs could be created by our legislation. We have an analysis that shows that. But this broader energy bill also will help. And that's one reason we need to move forward with this. So we are grateful that our legislation is part of this broader bill. The broader bill is called the Energy Policy Modernization Act. This is the one that Senator Murkowski and Senator Cantwell have been talking about on the floor. I support that broader legislation also, as does Senator Shaheen. And we like it because it's a broader bill that looks at this energy issue as an all of the above. In other words, we should be using various sources of energy and producing more energy, but we should also be using what we have more efficiently. And we're delighted that our legislation, the Portman-Shaheen legislation, is Title I of this broader bill. This is the opportunity for us to do something really good for the economy, this broader bill as well as our specific bill. We think that our specific bill is really important with regard to jobs. Now, one thing that I hear back home is from our manufacturing companies, they'd like to become more competitive so that they can create more jobs in Ohio and in America. We're starting to bring some jobs back because energy prices are relatively low, natural gas and oil in particular. But one of the issues they're facing overseas is other countries are more energy efficient, so their manufacturing companies are more efficient, so they're competing with companies that have a lower cost to produce the same product. So one reason they're excited about this legislation and why the National Association of Manufacturers is for this legislation, has worked with us from the start, is that this provides them access to new technologies on energy efficiency that'll let them compete globally with other companies and create more jobs. This is going to result in more jobs coming to Ohio, more jobs coming to New Hampshire, more jobs coming to America. We like that about the legislation. It also has more jobs because these energy efficiency retrofits are going to create more jobs and activity here in this country. So as buildings become more efficient, you need workers to work on that. We have some training programs in our legislation, for instance, to provide that workforce. We're going to create more jobs. Energy independence. This lets us actually produce more energy here, the underlying bill, but use it more efficiently. So I like producing more and using less. It's a nice combination. And it lets us say to other countries in the world, you know, we're going to be energy independent, so we're not going to be subject to the volatile and dangerous parts of the world where a lot of our energy tends to come from. In fact, we're going to be a net exporter over time. Energy efficiency helps us to be able to do that. Our trade deficit is driven by a couple of things. I'm a former U.S. trade representative, and yes, countries like China and other countries aren't playing by the rules, and that's a problem, and we need to address that. But another one is energy. We still do bring in more energy than we're exporting, and that's an opportunity for us with efficiency to help improve our trade deficit, which helps the economy overall. Improving the environment, Senator Shaheen talked about this, but the analysis she was using is that 21 million cars being taken off the road is the equivalent savings that's in this legislation for emissions. And that's because of the energy efficiency. So this is an opportunity for us to be much more energy efficient in terms of our economy and to be more competitive, but also to clean the environment. So this is a good example of that. And by the way, it's not a big regulatory approach, as some other approaches are. It doesn't have any mandates in it. So it's not going to kill jobs. It's actually going to create jobs and yet help the environment. That's a good combination for us, and one that, you know, we're excited about because it's a way for us to both help the economy and help the environment. That's important too. So we're excited about getting this across the finish line because we know it's the right legislation, it's the right time. We think there's an opportunity here for us to actually do something that's bipartisan, something that we can get through the House, and to get to the President's desk for his signature. One reason we're excited about the prospects of getting something done is that we have so much support around the country. There are over 260 trade associations, groups that have now supported this legislation. And by the way, they range from the National Association of Manufacturers, as I talked about earlier, to the Sierra Club, to the Alliance to Save Energy, to the United States Chamber of Commerce. That's not a group that normally gets together behind legislation. So this is an opportunity for us to get a lot of groups involved and focused, because it does make good economic sense, good energy sense, and good environmental sense. While helping others, again, in the private sector, the bill does not have mandates. And I think that's very important. This is legislation that provides incentives but not mandates. The final piece I want to talk about is one that everybody should be for. And it's going to actually help reduce the costs of the federal government, therefore help us all as taxpayers. And that's to take on the federal government's efficiency challenge. The United States federal government, we believe, is the largest energy user in the United States and may well be the largest energy user in the world. And, you know, my view on this is let's practice what we preach. You know, the federal government's talking about green technologies and energy efficiency and so on, but in our own federal government, we see huge gaps and huge opportunities. So this legislation goes after that and specifically puts in place requirements for the federal government to be much more efficient with how it uses energy. That will make a big difference in terms of everything we talked about with regard to the environment and the benefits of efficiency, but it also helps the taxpayer, because at the end of the day, we will be spending less on energy for the federal government as taxpayers. So it's another part of this legislation that I think is really important, and one where I would hope everybody would be supportive. Overall, we believe this legislation will save consumers $13.7 billion annually in reduced energy costs. So this is a big deal. This is something that if we can get it through the Senate this week and get it through the House and get it to the President for his signature, will make a real difference in the families I represent and all of us here in this chamber have the honor to represent. So I want to thank Senator Shaheen for her patience over 4 or 5 years working on this together with me, and the good work that she has done and others have done to give us this opportunity to be able to help those folks who we represent with an all-of-the-above energy strategy that's good for jobs, good for the environment, good for the taxpayer. Thank you, Madam President.